And I think there's a good reason for it. I can't defend it right now, but it's what I do. It works for me. Welcome to the World Watercolor Month video challenge. World Watercolor Month is a global celebration of this beautiful medium of watercolor, and it's happening all through July. Details on everything that's going on for World Watercolor Month, the prizes, the sponsors, the charitable foundation that you can support, the merchandise celebrating World Watercolor Month. All of this is there for you at worldwatercolormonth.com. Today, however, I'm going to be painting along with our World Watercolor Month prompt for July 1st, which is sunlit, but I'm not doing this alone. I'm going to be sharing a video demonstration using the sunlit prompt as my inspiration. And then I want to encourage you to join the video. It's kind of a video hop. I have a bunch of other artists I've invited to take part in this video challenge, painting with this theme of sunlit today, and they're sharing their videos here on YouTube as well. After the video, click the link below the hashtag World Watercolor Month video challenge so that you can see the other artists participating and watch the videos that they've created celebrating our July 1st prompt of sunlit. Come back next week, we're going to do it all again. And if you want to participate in World Watercolor Month, visit worldwatercolormonth.com to find out how you can get involved. Use the hashtag World Watercolor Month. And if you're posting a video, include World Watercolor Month video challenge in your hashtags as well. I'm celebrating World Watercolor Month with a new video every day in July. Today I'm working with a subject that's very close to my heart and close to my home. This little view that I've sketched in the upper part of the screen here is just a little brief walk down the road. So it feels a lot like a plein air painting in terms of my knowledge of the area, the freshness of the subject. I just took my reference photo, and this means I get to bring also an inner knowledge of the scene to my painting. And I really think that brings much more life to my paintings when I have that insider knowledge of what's actually happening in the scene rather than just the details. I'm just pulling up the reference photo itself on my phone here. I want to be thinking about not just what the photo tells me, because it's really easy to zero in on details, but I want to think about the sketch that I have where I've kind of established where some of my darker values are as well. The prompt of sunlit works well for almost everything I paint because I'm always looking for the fall of light and shadow. And in this case, the light is falling both in front of and behind the trees. And so I have the opportunity to be thinking about that as I paint that line of trees breaking up the sunlit areas and casting a shadow. I'm using my pencil right now to just place some lines to tell me where things are. And when I sketch in pencil, I try to keep my lines very loose, very suggestive, so that I can kind of follow the direction the painting wants to take and not feel too hemmed in by a strict kind of sense of outline. For most landscapes, I tend to start with the sky. It's at the top of the page. It's generally a lighter value. I'm working with a large, just kind of loose hake brush here. I think it's just a Japanese calligraphy brush. And I'm just pulling in some cobalt blue to just get that position of a little bit of sky in the scene. And because the distant hills have a bluish tint, I'm thinking about those and making some connections as well. It's in the early stages of a painting, I'm generally trying to think about how things connect with each other. So it's never just about paint this section and then move to the next section. I'm always trying to think about how those two sections are communicating with each other. Like leaving some white space to suggest clouds. It gives us a feeling for weather. And now we're going to bring in some greens. I'm thinking about how all of these pieces fit together. So I'm actually painting the foreground trees and the distant treed hills at the same time, thinking about them kind of as one shape at this point. And I've got kind of a muddy green going on here. It's just a combination of different colors. There's a hue from Rockwell called Onat Diamond Yellow, which is really a beautiful green to play with. So I'm throwing quite a bit of that down on the paper. Little pops, I think, of yellow in there as well. And I'm really thinking about how all of these greens fit together, that there is kind of a lightest green that it's going to pull everything together. And if I can throw that in, this is a transparent green gold made by Schmincke. And just getting those lightest greens all connected at this point is going to give me that sense of sunlight. So I've got the sunlit hill in the background and the sunlit grasses in the foreground. A little bit of Aussie red gold. Get a little bit warmer. There's kind of some buttery kind of orangey dried weeds that it was funny because I didn't notice them when I took the photo, but they're my favorite thing about the photograph. And this stage of the painting is really all about placement. So making those little soft connections. Nothing's really crisply separated right now, except for in that right-hand corner. And that's about to change. Bringing in some warm orangey hues there. I think that's a little more of the Aussie red gold. And I'm already thinking about my weeds and using some of that. Actually, that's fired gold ochre. It's a new color I'm trying out from Daniel Smith. And just playing with color, seeing how things fit together, seeing how I can create an impression of the landscape that I saw that day. I know I can't do it justice, so the goal is always just to get a feeling for that summer day. This style of direct painting means everything gets painted in one session. And that's very much like a plein air practice. If I was painting this out on location, I would have the same habit of just wanting to paint everything in one sitting. And this actually helps strengthen my ability to do that when I get outdoors. Pulling in a scruffy brush and a little bit of violet. This is a manganese violet. It's going to give me a bit of, I like using violet for kind of a shadow color. So it's going to give me that little hint of shadows, while it's also a bright enough color that it could suggest flowers, just a little bit brighter than, I hesitate to use just a blue for shadows. And the more I look at different shadow hues, I tend to see violet in a lot of things. I'm going to take a progress photo right now because this is my first layer. And when, everything's kind of established, I have the basic positioning of everything in the painting. And this is where I get to start building detail over top. And whether I wait for it to dry, which I often will do, or try to keep painting right now, this is the feeling of the end of the first stage of the painting process. Because this painting is about sunlight, it's a sunlit scene, these shadows are important. When we have sunlight, we also have shadows, and I often think that the brighter the sunlight, the darker the shadows are going to be. And so I'm already starting to think about those shadows, and I'm trying to think about them as a mass of shape and really trust my eyes to paint what I see and not necessarily what I want to see. And shadows are interesting because sometimes you'll have a shadow cast on your painting that is from an object that's not even in your painting. There can be a tree off off to the left that's not in the photo, that's casting a shadow on your scene. And so you're actually, you're not just painting what's there and what you see, but you're painting something that's not there. You're telling a story. And I think that's really interesting. I think it's an idea that would be fun to explore as an artist, painting what's not there. And what does that say about our mission as artists? I don't know. It's just intriguing. I'm working with a deep violet blue again, so it's a combination of the colors I've already been using, the manganese, the cobalt blue. I can tweak that color as I paint. It's not just the same color the whole time. I vary between warm and cool. I'm adding a little bit of kind of an orangey red, McQueen sienna, to my blue mixture, and that's giving me a bit of a violet. It's a murky violet, so I have a really nice kind of neutral feel there. And my willows are coming down into my shadows. It's going to be hard to tell where the willows end and the shadows begin, and that's the feeling that I want to create. This does feel like a stage 2 of the painting because I am developing smaller shapes over top of that one kind of major mass of shape and value that created my first layer. And so I think about each additional layer, whether I'm waiting for things to dry or whether I'm working with continuing on without stopping. I'm thinking of this as a second layer process where I'm refining shapes on top of those major masses. So we're drilling down a little bit on the subject. I'm working with a combination here as well. I'm bringing in some of those greens from the very first layer. There's no dramatic shift of colors at this point. We're working with what has been established already and building on top of it. So emphasizing it a bit with additional color and shape. I need to mention the brush I'm using because I have been using this brush for so many years, and it's pretty fabulous for making these beautiful fine lines, pulling those lines out for all of my little willow twigs. And using the side of the brush means I can create a bigger shape as well. And it's the Cheap Joe's Loose Goose Dagger Striper from Cheap Joe's, and I'll link it up in the description below the video. I buy these in bulk because I bring them to my workshops for my students to use. They are just a really fun brush, actually not fantastic for spatter, but really great for creating lines where you're working without a lot of control. If I have a lot of control over my line, it's probably going to look like a fence post more than a twig. Shapes that are really organic, and this fine, unpredictable brush really helps me do that. Playful with colors, combinations of my Onat Diamond Yellow, which is that green that I mentioned, my Cobalt Blue, my Aussie Red Gold. I'm just dancing back and forth between mixtures of those colors to give my tree foliage some really beautiful variety. And this is the point where I start to have some fun. With my brush, I can spatter. Again, it's not my favorite brush for spatter, but I'm getting a really fine little sprinkling of what could be those little orangey weeds that I was talking about. I want to see those in this painting. And my Fired Gold Ochre is doing a great job of giving me the hues that I want. Bringing in more spatter because it makes great leaves. And that little pop of dark color, you can see how dominant it looks. As it sits on the paper, I have the opportunity to work with it with my brush a little bit. So I'm emphasizing additional transitions of that color with the spatter. And I'm going to bring in some further darks. This is one of my favorite hues to work with for watercolor, Moonglow from Daniel Smith. It's a cool enough violet that it looks shadowy, and it's murky enough that it doesn't it doesn't stand out too much. I used to use dioxazine purple and it was just way too much. Back to the weeds. I feel like my attention span is a little bit fragmented here. I think I'm kind of working all over the paper, which I feel like is a strength. When I'm working all over the paper like this, then I don't overemphasize any one area, and I can just try to seek kind of a flow and balance between all the different elements. Pulling some more of those weeds across. I'm really exaggerating their warmth with that quinsiena. And it's echoing that little wash of quinsiena and Aussie Red Gold that I used in the beginning. I'm going for a larger brush at this point, and this one has a lot of similar characteristics to the Dagger Striper. It's just a Japanese calligraphy brush. Found it at a craft store. Nothing fancy, but it's making a broader stroke than I can get with my Dagger Striper. And so I'm seeing thicker branches, thicker tree trunks, which I need. I'm kind of varying my strokes. There's a few shorter strokes. I'm drawing some up from the bottom, and some actually are kind of coming up from the middle. Your strokes shouldn't all be complete, and they shouldn't all be the same width. So changing up your brush. I do try to work in similar angles, it feels like, so you can kind of see these tree trunks coming out from unifying sources. And it's very seldom that I'll crisscross in kind of an X shape at the same time. I might be working at one angle now, and then I might come back and cross it later. But I tend to not, I'm working with that diagonal to the left, then I pause, and then I might take my diagonals off to the right. But I tend to not go back and forth. And I think there's a good reason for it. I can't defend it right now, but it's what I do. It works for me. Big, bold, scary tree trunk right there. It's not going to feel so lonely once I've added a few more. And I'm back in the Dagger Striper again. So you can see it can make a broader line as well. It doesn't have to be the calligraphy brush. When I place a big dark stroke like that, I'll often draw color out from it. And so then it gets a little bit lighter. And then sometimes, rather than pulling color out, I might just make darker strokes that mean that it doesn't look so dark by itself anymore. Mixing up a little bit of a green, and this is an interesting green because I'm working with some of the yellows that I've used already. I think it was that transparent green gold, and mixing it into my blue mix that I used for the sky. And it's giving me kind of a murky, cool shadow color. It's a green, but there's a lot of blue in it. And so it actually is pairing nicely with the moon glow. It's like you're coming out of the shadows a little bit, so you can see a bit more to the green. It's not so desaturated. And so it just gives that feeling of the light, the quality of the light changing. I want to connect these two elements. They're kind of separate from each other right now. So just a little zigzag in green. I might do a little bit more later on to connect the left and the right clumps of trees. And maybe the left and the right clumps of weeds as well. There does feel like there's like a strong divide down the middle of the painting. I've been playing with adding more complexity in my layers when it comes to trees and tree branches. Sometimes there have been times in my painting journey where I've simplified my masses of trees quite a lot and just had a few branches. Other times where I've overdone it and there's too many. So I'm just trying to always kind of get a good balance of detail while also feeling like I don't have to paint every object. Spattering more of that quinceaña right now because my shadows on the right side are wet. You can see the quinceaña bleeding into that shadow area. It's really beautiful. Notice right now the story sunlight is coming through here. We are getting that feeling of dark shadows, and with those strong darks in the willows. And then we're getting the sunlight in the background, the sunlight in the foreground. It's starting to do what we wanted it to do. And that makes me really happy. I like the way the white cloud right in the middle of the page as well is indicating just this beautiful glow of sunlight as well. Using that skinny brush to just pull some little grass stems downward. And I've attached that mass of weeds now so I don't have a break in the middle. And I'm moving across and connecting my willows kind of in the middle ground as well, with just a little bit of shadow and twig, a little hint of shape there, so we don't have such a strong divide. This is really third layer stage kind of thinking, isolating or honing in again, drilling down on details. A lot more spatter, a lot more finer lines. And looking for just those finishing details to pull everything together. Right now I'm refining my horizon with a dark, cool, earthy green. And kind of trying to go in between the trees. And then I'm softening that line upward into the distant mass of trees. It's going to be cooler because it's more distant. It's going to be softer because we don't want it to be competing with the nearer elements that have a bit more detail. Small details like that can really help pull a painting together. So I try to look for areas where I can increase contrast, and I'm bringing a horizon line across here as well. This time there's a distant field there that's kind of a warmer color, so I'm using that kind of earthy orange. A little bit of the fired gold ochre. Warming up that corner as well, just keeping the warmth to remind us that the sun is shining. We want light values to help it to glow, and warm temperature colors to give that feeling of warmth. The cooler colors end up in the shadows. Just pulling out my violet here and mixing it with a little bit of my orange. And it's interesting because they are kind of a weird color to mix, but I'm just bringing in some of those shadows that were in that lower part of the painting. I used a violet prior to this. Bringing the violet in now again helps create another band of shadow just along the bottom of the page. The goal here is to think about the fact that the eye is going to be drawn upward towards the warm band of those dried weeds, that lovely band of orange, maybe even into that pale green in the distant field, and adding this kind of shadowed violet orange. I don't think anyone on the planet has ever said the words violet orange as describing a color, but it's a shadow neutral kind of hue that's making the bottom of the painting just that much quieter, so that the bright, clean colors are not competing. Unifying it with a little bit of the quinceaña, just a few little twiggy weed lines. Boy, I like painting lines. Just looking for more places to place a few little finishing darks. This left side felt a little lighter and a little weaker than the right side of the painting. And so bringing in a little bit more green, earthy green, whatever you're choosing for an earthy green, connecting those elements, that same earthy green, just bringing some bushes in, short bushes, little pops, little dots of leaves. looking for places where shadows might be landing. These are the finishing details I didn't used to do. I would stop a little bit sooner in my painting practice, and my paintings would be perhaps clearer, a little bit tidier, but I feel like there's more depth when I take a little bit more time and look for places to put those darks, look for ways to just refine or shrink down, drill down just a little further, a few little tiny marks. A little bit of spatter can bring in those tiny marks as well. So then you have these layers of differing shapes. We've got differing values, differing temperatures. A little splash of that green gold, bringing some sunlight right up to the viewer. Look at how that connects our weeds down to the bottom of the page. I'm at the stage where I'm debating whether or not I should call it done. Could I add anything else? Wait a minute. One last little playful, rule-breaking. Yep, there we go. A little horizon blue, a little lovely little robin's egg blue, and just a little blammo with spatter. It's going to add that little pop of color into the trees. You can dab a little bit if you want to put a few spots where you want them instead of where spatter says they should go. And maybe a little bit just down on the shadows. I'm sharing links to the resources I'm using today in the description below the video. Please do check that out. Also do take a look at the other participants of the World Watercolor Month video challenge. After this video wraps up, throwing more darks in. It's never too late. Add those few details. After this video wraps up, click the hashtag World Watercolor Month video challenge, and you can see what my friends, other watercolor artists, have been painting on YouTube here in celebration of World Watercolor Month using the prompt Sunlit. I love seeing how many different ways there are to interpret just a single word. It's fantastic. We'll be doing this every week through World Watercolor Month. So be watching for that new videos to be added to that hashtag World Watercolor Month video challenge. More refining lines. It's a variation of light and dark values in my branches. Some are darkest darks, that rich moon glow. Others are paler and feel more distant because the value is lighter. And so those changes of contrast give us a sense of different distances and weights to those branches. Thanks for watching. Now head to the description below the video and click the hashtag World Watercolor Month video challenge to see how other artists have painted this prompt. And don't forget to support World Watercolor Month by visiting worldwatercolormonth.com and joining in the global celebration. I'm Angela Fehr. Thanks for watching.